wealth is something that's always on our minds. I mean, ask Mina, Mario, myself. Like once you like open up a household and you've got responsibilities, you're always thinking to yourself, well, I'm just gonna like work that extra bit more to make more money, or my family needs that extra bit of security or that extra bit of financial wealth, right? So this is something that's definitely going to be relevant to all of us. But how should we as Christians approach it, right? Because there are many sayings by Christ in the gospel, right? Like it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the gates of heaven, right? Like is Christ saying that no, we shouldn't acquire wealth, like being rich is a bad thing? Or when Christ says not to worry about tomorrow, like, oh, should I just live keda like careless and let tomorrow come and so be it? So there is sort of a wisdom behind it, and tonight Mario is going to lead in the discussion. But part of tonight as well involves you guys sharing your thoughts and being open. So what does concern you? Are you guys worried about the future? I mean, if you just turn to social media, right, or the news, oh, interest rates going up, oh, buying a house is becoming even harder, oh, the property prices, yada yada yada. It is something that's sort of like drilled into all of us. So be open, share. This is a safe space, and hopefully we come out with a message that we can put into our lives. So Mario, please take the stage. All right. I think that one.
Yeah. Testing, 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 testing. John. Ah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna pick your brain anyway. So, all right. How is everyone today? Some new faces. Sorry, what was your name? I haven't seen you before. What was your name? Yeah. Jasmine. Sorry, I'm the worst. Apparently, if you ever meet someone, the best way to remember their name is like when they introduce you, like they say, "Hey, I'm Jasmine." You say, "Nice to meet you, Jasmine," and then it kind of sticks. But I didn't do that, so that's why I forgot. And Jacob, I know your name because Mina yelled it out from across the room. So welcome. All right. So as Philo said, this is going to be an interactive chat discussion. We were talking about this topic, and we were thinking, how do we actually approach it? Because in this day and age, I feel like, and I was saying this to Philo, most of us know that wealth doesn't bring happiness. Is that a good starting point? If we just say, if we say that we know that wealth doesn't bring happiness, would everyone does everyone connect with that concept? Or does someone want to disagree and just kind of flesh it out a bit more? Because this talk can either go for like 5 minutes or it can go for like 6 hours, depending on how deep you want to go with the concept that we're going to explore. So, any thoughts on that? So, wealth as a common denominator cannot equal happiness. Does anyone disagree, or does anyone want to flesh it out a little bit more? Because, yeah. All right, I'm going to get some thoughts. I'm just going to walk around. I'm going to pick on... What was your first name again? Philo. Talk to us. What do you think?
Does wealth bring happiness? You do a lot of talking outside. Why are you trying now?
So the question was what?
Does wealth bring happiness?
Is it okay to say wealth does not happen?
Well, wealth is not happiness, but wealth can buy happiness. So, for example, like if I'm broke, maybe I can't afford like a PlayStation 5 or like a holiday or something, you know what I mean? So if I have money, then I have that luxury to buy, an extra something to help me, keep time occupied, maybe a hobby, like if I'm like a painter, like I want to buy paint, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Yeah. Jacob, what do you think? There's no right or wrong answer. Just what.
I don't know. I feel like it's mixed. I don't know. You can either I feel like it'd be better.
Yeah.
Like a lot of us would be happy having to worry about financial, houses paid, cars are paid. Yeah, but no, it comes with its downside.
Yeah. What do you think some downside are? Like, so what comes with its downside to being wealthy?
Sorry.
What comes with its downside to being wealthy?
Yeah.
Give us an example.
A lot of people will start using you more. A lot of people will start talking to you more.
Depending on how wealthy you are. Extremely wealthy.
I've heard people in the past say, "Yeah, Jerome, come forward." And come forward. Okay. Adriana, we're all like, we got.
I'm gonna pick people who are sitting alone. By the way, you're my easy targets.
I've heard people in the past say, wealth doesn't necessarily bring you happiness, but it makes life easy. So, for example, if I'm ever in a jam, I've got my money, which can get me out of it. So if someone gets sick, I can pay for treatment. Or if my car breaks down, I can buy a new one tomorrow. So it can make life easier.
Very cool. So those that are coming a little bit late, we're talking about wealth, and the kind of opening to this discussion was, are we all on the same page to say that wealth does not equal happiness? And if everyone's okay with that statement, we can kind of move on, but we're just getting some ideas about what that looks like in real practical life. Because it would be ignorant to say that you don't need money to live in this day and age. That would be ignorant. So we're just trying to look at it from a practical perspective. Continue.
I think money gives you like superficial, temporary happiness, but not like depth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, go on. I'll come back to that. There's some interesting things that you spoke about.
I think I'm going to not play devil's advocate, but I do see the other side of it where making money promotes certain habits that allow you to be happy. So being more ambitious, being more resilient, all these things that you need to navigate within the world in order for you to strive for happiness is a requisite. So you can see that someone that makes money usually goes through those trials and tribulations in order to reach that form of success. So it's not the money in of itself, but the lessons you've learned from it. Although there are people out there that have gotten rich quick from whatever scheme it is, but the general population, I think, I'm looking from that end.
Yeah. Okay. Just thanks, Jeremiah. Respect that. So I just wanted to quickly point out something that you said. So you said something about wealth creating some sort of superficial happiness, but the people who are superficially happy, they lack a depth that they're happy with, right? So what do you mean by they lack a deeper happiness? What does that look like and feel like?
I don't know. I just feel like financial happiness, it's just a stress relief for some aspect of your life, but it's not it doesn't fix your problems for you. Maybe a bit, but not it doesn't, the connections you make and just things in life that are worth more. It doesn't do anything. I don't know.
Okay. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here. So is it possible to be wealthy but super happy on a deep level? Is that possible? Okay. So for the latecomers, we're talking about wealth, and we're saying that wealth, we're kind of agreeing that wealth doesn't equal happiness. And so we're going to go a little bit deeper into that idea of what then is the right balance to have. Because it would be ignorant to not prioritize money in a world that we live in today. So I've got a couple of verses as a starting point, just to go into a little bit more of a discussion here. So this one I really like. It's from Matthew 6:26. It says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Alright, so what's actually being said in this verse? Like what is the practical takeaway from that verse that stands out, like just hits you in the face? And what does that translate to in our modern day life? Someone, yes, go on. There's no right or wrong. Do you want me to read it again? Oh, you got it.
No, I can read it again.
Read it again? Okay. So, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money.
What stands out to me from that?
Yeah.
That you can't serve two masters.
Okay.
Money and God.
But what I mean, you have to
Wait.
work.
Yeah.
So how many hours a week do you do of work? Do you work
You
work full time, right?
Yeah, at the moment
Yeah.
I do.
How many hours roughly do you do?
About 38.
38?
Yeah, about 38 hours.
Okay. How much, sorry, I'm going to be a little bit aggressive here.
Mm.
Don't take it personal.
Mm.
How many hours of time do you devote to, let's say God?
Not 38.
So if you were to look at it just from like a statistical perspective,
Yeah.
would you agree that it's not a personal thing, I'm
it's
just talking generically here, because I work
serving
about,
money more, or I'm serving my boss more than I'm serving God.
right.
Is that the question that you were going to
Yes, that's the question I'm asking. I fall in the same basket, by the way. So I'm speaking to myself here. I'm a school teacher. If no one knows. Anyone here studying education or teaching? No one? Okay. Psychology? Couple? Business? No. Oh, we've got another teacher here. Mina. Come on, man. Okay. So you're saying most of your time is dedicated to working and less of your time is dedicated to God. How do you think God sees that?
Never thought of it that way. Sorry, you're really putting me on the spot here. It's not the greatest thing that I'm spending more of my time at work. But it's also kind of like you've got to kind of find a way to make a living in a healthy sense, where you can also kind of be able to also give back through what you're working. I mean, it depends on what you're doing with. So like you're working to earn an income, right? To support yourself. You've got shelter, food, to kind of have those basic needs. And some people take it to the next step and they have a few other things, some luxuries that you don't necessarily need to live with. And then what you decide to do with that pay. So what are you doing with the rest of that? Do you need to earn that much money? And then like, are you making good choices with that? Maybe you can be giving that back to the community, be giving that back to donations in the church or your time at church. Like the other week we had, what was it, where we used the shoe boxes and we send over gifts overseas.
Yeah. Okay. I like the theme that you're going on with. Jerry, I wanted to come back to your comment because I think it ties in a little bit to what you're talking about. You spoke about ambition and how working can grow your ambition to make money.
Not just ambition, but also resilience. Just really all the lessons you learn from building your network, your profile, essentially, making money. It's not the money that's going to make you happy, but the lessons you learn from it.
Okay, interesting. Okay. I'm going to pick on some other people because I like where this is going and I want to land somewhere, but I don't want to say it because I want to see if you guys can get there with me. All right. So we talked about work. We said eventually we're going to work, right? Everyone here at some point is going to work a majority of their week, yeah? And we talked about how that is it's unbalanced to work that much of your time and only a small portion of that time is dedicated to God, right? But how do we get the right balance between that. Because this is, it's, does everyone know what an existential problem is? Do you know? I never knew what that word existential problem is until about 2 years ago. It was way too big for my vocabulary. So just so we kind of understand what an existential problem is, an existential problem is a dilemma or an internal warfare that you have about your existence. So for example, if I wake up every day and I don't want to go and face the world in a way that makes me, I don't know if I want to use the word happy. Let's just say if I don't want to face the world in a way that makes my life meaningful and the life of others around me meaningful, then I've got an existential problem. My existence is not justified by what I'm doing, right? So, how do we avoid this existential problem and bring it back to this idea of living for God? But money is also a factor, right? So like the concept of wealth, let's factor that into this existential problem that we have. Okay, where can we land with this? Annie, how do you say your full? Anne-Marie, and what's your last name? I'm just going to call you Gurgis from now on, because I always forget to say Anne-Marie. I don't know. Go on. What do you think?
Like you're talking about how like work and like our relationship with God is like two separate things, but it should be like one thing.
Yes.
Like it should be like, for example, like Joseph, he worked in Egypt and all that, but he still maintained his connection with God through the work he done for the land.
Yeah.
So it's like what we need to do, like work needs to also, we do it with love, like with God in it.
Yeah. And that goes back to what Jerry was saying about this idea of work building us up and being meaningful, right? So like I'm a school teacher, and I say to my Year 12s, guys, what are you thinking about doing after you leave school? And they're like, oh, I don't really know yet. Thinking about this, but I don't know, right? I don't know. Like it's a huge dilemma for Year 12 students not to know what they're going to do, right? And that's an existential problem. At that point in their life, they're actually in this dilemma. They don't actually know what they're going to devote their time to, right? And so a big part of wealth, because we said at the beginning, wealth cannot be tied to happiness. Sorry. Wealth doesn't determine happiness. So something has to determine our meaning in our life, right? If we know it's not wealth, we said wealth makes life easier, yes? But if wealth can't determine our deeper happiness, which you talked about before, thank you for bringing that up, okay? Something has to, right? And so now I want you to think about, if you were to do something that created wealth intrinsically, forget about the outside material world, if you had to create wealth intrinsically, what would that translate to in your real world existential surroundings? What would that translate to? Because it's really important to understand that concept, right? It's really important to understand how that fits into this topic, right? And we talked about this. We talked about how like wealth is a really big talking point. Like I'm 38, and there's not one conversation in a week that goes by where people talk about property prices in Sydney, right? Like everyone is just talking about property prices in Sydney. Like I can predict if there's a group of guys hanging out with each other, I promise you, if they're together for an hour, the topic of property in Sydney is going to come up, right? So it's a thing. We can't be ignorant and say, look, we can't talk about this stuff, right? But let's try and build ourselves on a different way of thinking, as opposed to like the kind of individualistic Western capitalistic mindset, right? Okay, so has anyone heard of the quote? How does it go? I had it on the tip of my tongue. You'll never work a day in your life if you love what you do, right? So that's actually a good measure of solving part of your existential problem. Is if you wake up every day and you're getting paid for what you don't feel like you should be getting paid for, right? Because that's also tied into your identity. Like everyone here has their own identity, right? So like for me growing up, I was super sporty and I loved sport. It was my life, right? Soccer, basketball, whatever, you name it, for me, I just had to be there if it was sport related. So sport was part of my identity. So growing up, I thought, okay, what could I potentially do? And then I started coaching, and then I really liked coaching kids. So then I got into teaching, and I went down the line of PE teaching. So now I've got like the perfect dream job. I get to play sport every day. I get to teach kids about health, and I'm getting paid for it. I can't believe how lucky I am to have that job, right? Like, it's amazing. Winter, sun's shining, the air is fresh, kids are moving. You know, it's just, it really is my happy place, right? So I think about, it's really important to be content and choose well where your wealth, especially because you got to dedicate a lot of your life to it, where that starts, and that is your vocation. That's where you know dedicate most of your time to. So going back to what you were talking about, absolutely yes, part of our time is dedicated to work, but we need to intertwine that into our relationship with God, right? Okay, so you'll never work a day in your life if you love what you do. Okay, let's go to another verse. I like this one. And again, I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. With man it is impossible, but with God all things are possible. So that's from Matthew 19:24. What do you think that's talking about? I'm going to pick on... What do you think? What is Jesus talking to in that verse?
I'm trying to relate it, I guess, to possessions, where if you're rich, cool, you're holding on to so many physical possessions and properly status that could come with it. So it's kind of harder for you to go through the narrow gates and let go of everything and solely focus just on Christ and eternity. That's where my mind goes.
I like that. I never knew this. I heard of it maybe like 6-7 years ago. But Jesus, in that statement, the eye of the needle was actually a gate, a small little gate that people would enter after dark in Jerusalem, in the walls of Jerusalem, and it was referred to as the eye of the needle. And it was impossible for camels to go into that gate with their luggage and their, you know, how they used to load them up with different things. So the camel actually had to strip back everything that was on its back in order to enter to that gate. And so that was the analogy that Christ was giving in that instance. He was pretty much saying that it's impossible for the camel to go into that gate unless it strips everything off. So it's kind of speaking, what you're speaking about is, you know, what Jesus was kind of trying to, like get them to think about, right? And it's kind of, it reminds me of the Old Testament story in Exodus, where King Pharaoh, God says, I hardened his heart, right? And after all these plagues, you'd think like after plague 1, plague 2, plague 3, Pharaoh's heart would just, realize that God's in control of this, right? But he's relentless. His heart is so hard, right? His heart is so hard that he doesn't get the point. And when I was thinking about it, I was trying to understand, why would Pharaoh not just concede and let God, let the people go? And a big part of it was Pharaoh actually needed those people, the slaves, to build his empire. So without the slaves, Pharaoh wouldn't have been able to achieve what he's going to achieve. And so the reason why his heart was hardened is because he was attached so much to this material side of things, right? The status, the wealth, the big, castle that was being built for him, whatever it was. He was so attached to that he couldn't let that go. The idea of letting that go meant that Pharaoh would be less stature, right? And so that's why his heart was actually hardened. He couldn't concede to God and let the people go because he was attached to this idea of power. So some, like, wealth and the love for being wealthy can sometimes be attached to this idea of power, right? Like the wealthier I am, the more power I have. All right. Sorry, Jerry. Is that other microphone? Yeah.
I'd say that, like, another really great example is Judas. I mean, he was completely blinded. He was literally living with Christ for 3 years, literally living with God. You know, how can he be so blind? But it's interesting to see how money can blind you so much that even if you're sleeping right next to God himself, you can still betray him.
Absolutely. And there's actually a strong connection between Judas and Pharaoh. Because no matter what happened, no matter how close Judas was to Jesus, he couldn't concede. He couldn't be humble enough to see that God and Jesus were the ultimate beings in this world. Okay, so I'm going to throw this back out to you. What does it take? What does it take for us to have a balance? So what does a balanced life look like in terms of wealth and God in the picture? What does that practically look like? Okay, what's it practically look like? I'm going to go down the back. Yeah, I'll pick on someone down there. You know I'm coming for you, Danny. What does it look like? You got to turn it on. Yeah. Yeah, wealth and, like, balance with God. What does that look like?
I don't know how deep we are into the talk, but I would say living with God's your number one priority. I don't think there's any problem with wealth. I think we had this conversation a couple of months ago. It was like, example, if you're aiming to buy a expensive boat, working a Sunday, you'll get more money out of your Sunday, but you won't be going to church. I feel like if you're skipping church to make more money, that's when wealth becomes a real issue for you. But if you're just working hard, but you're still giving your time for Christ and for God, but then at the end of the day, your hard work has brought you wealth, then there's no issue with that. I think it's just that balance between church and knowing your priorities.
It's a really good point. Like, knowing how to draw the boundary of what is taking away your time and what's necessary. How good would you say you guys are at doing that? Like, you don't have to answer it out loud, just in your mind. Think about how good are you in your personal life of drawing that boundary between being consumed by this idea of wealth and knowing where God stands in your life. Just have a think about that. It's a really difficult journey. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm 38 years old, and there are a lot of times in my journey that I've fallen to this idea of, like, wealth. Okay, it's not an easy thing to navigate, right? It's quite complicated because as you get older, you get exposed to different ideas. People share some things with you. And then, you start thinking about, this might be a way to do it. And it's hard because naturally, everyone wants a shortcut, right? Everyone wants to be like an instant millionaire. It's part of our nature. Like, I think the best thing is not to deny that part of you, right? Like, there's a part of us that want that financial freedom. Okay, that's okay. That's an okay emotion to have. Right? God understands that we live in a world that is quite difficult. It's about how do you educate that emotion to be balanced, right? It's about how do you educate that emotion to be practical, right? Because I'll give you an example. When we first got married, we wanted to buy a car, right? And, like, we're just newly married, like, we didn't have a lot of money as newlyweds because most of it goes into your wedding, and we had a little bit of money saved for a car, and we just wanted something simple, right? Like, nothing extravagant. And we knew that we're going to have a family, so we thought we'll plan ahead. We'll buy a 7-seater, right? A Holden Captiva, nothing flash. So we were looking and we found this one car only had 27,000 kilometers, which is, fantastic. And it was a 2013 model and it was about 2017 in that period. So anyway, the person that we're going to buy it from lived towards the northern beaches. And we got to his house and it was this massive mansion. It had like a, 6-car garage, had a pool. He was building, more rooms on top. And we walk in, we're like, this guy, he's got a Porsche, he's just had all these cars, and he had this Holden Captiva. And we're like, oh, yeah, we're here to see the Captiva. He's like, yeah, cool. Anyway, we got talking, and then he started opening up to us. He started opening up to my wife and I. He's like, yeah, my wife and I were going through a divorce. That's why I'm selling the car. And he started talking about his problems. And he started talking about how his yacht took away his time, and then he joined some sort of club that went away on weekends, and he was really mingling with wealthy people, and then he didn't have enough time for his wife, and his wife kept telling him, I just feel alone, but he kept neglecting her, and his wealth created more problems. And he was telling us this, he was openly saying to us that all of the things that my wealth was buying was actually taking time away from the priority. And he had 3 kids. Right? And one of his kids was with him, and it was just really it was complicated. And I was trying to digest all this information whilst trying to think about what's a reasonable price to offer this guy without and it just hit me really, hard that this person really had his boundaries set completely unbalanced. And as you were saying, Daniel, there's absolutely nothing, by the way, there is nothing wrong with being wealthy. I wish and I pray that everyone in this room finds wealth in whatever way God gives them that, right? But I pray that that wealth comes with also balance. Okay, because in that situation where we were buying that car and that person was telling us their life story, that wasn't a balanced approach to the wealth that person had. And generally speaking, you'll find that as a common denominator. The more you have, the more worry you have. Or the more you have, the more you've got to attend to it. Right? It's really, so you have more money, more problems. One other thing, right? Something else to think about. A little bit off the spirituality side, more of the practical side. It's all relative. Oh, and a couple of statistics. If you earn more than $65,000 a year, you're in the top 5% of people in the world. If you earn over $65,000 a year, you're in the top 5% of people. Another statistic, there's a study that was done, and they were measuring the correlation between income and happiness. And it was something like $75,000 and above. So anyone who's earning $75,000, okay, maybe it's changed now because of inflation. Let's call it $95,000 as an example. There's actually nothing that indicates more happiness if you're earning over that amount, right? So if I'm earning $1 million, the data is saying that there is no increase in happiness because you earn $1 million, because someone who's earning 85,000 has actually shown the same amount of happiness. Now, the metrics that they measure that off, I don't know what they are, because I don't think they factor in spirituality and faith, right? But just as a generic kind of idea is that they're showing that really wealthy people don't necessarily have the same amount of happiness as someone who's an average Joe, or don't have more happiness than the average Joe. Yeah. So, a practical thing that I always think about, it's relative, right? If I earn $1.5 million a year, I'm going to buy a car that's worth 300 grand, right? Come on, you're going to be kidding yourself if you're not going to go buy a car that's really nice. If I earn $100,000 a year, I'm probably going to buy a car that's worth 25, 30 grand a year. 30 grand in total. So it becomes relative, right? You got to think of it like just because you earn a lot doesn't mean you're saving more, right? So like there's this, if I earn $1.5 million a year, I'm going to build a house that's probably worth $3 million, right? So don't be caught in this concept of, wealth equals more disposable income, because that can also be a bit of a trap too. The more you make, the more you spend. The more you make, the more you have. Okay, so just don't be misguided by this concept. Yes.
Mario, question. So there's this idea, and I think I think guys have this idea a lot more. It's this idea that I need to be able to provide enough so my family is doing well. And then what I always question is, what is enough? Like, do I need to earn enough to send my kids to like top end private schools? Do I need to live in a very luxe area? Is the suburbs, are they good enough? Is, I don't know, these other areas? What's your take on that? Like, because it's, I mean, as a guy, for me, for example, it's like that's always a stressor. It's like I've got to like work more and more so I can be able to like give more to my family.
It's a really good question. I think it's definitely a case by case situation. Depends on what your there's like, what's not only your desire but what's your partner's desire too, because they might have some ideas around what they want, and so you definitely have to speak about that. But yeah, because we were discussing this, right? So like, do you want to, because if you earn a certain income, right, you probably want to send your kids to a school that is reasonable, right? Like that has got good culture, that's got good students, and so sometimes that can come at a price, right? And like we're probably talking about a few years down the track for most of you, because you don't have families yet, except me now, okay? But they're things that you're going to think about, right? It's definitely a decision that you and your partner make as you get to that point. But I think the most important education is the education at home. So think about what's the most important thing as a family, and work on those, as opposed to what are the things that are important in terms of wealth, like a house. Like that shouldn't really be, or where you're going to live, that shouldn't be the most important thing, because your home, your family inside that home, that's more important than your location, right? I mean, you could live in eastern suburbs right on the beach, but it doesn't mean that your kids are going to turn out to be, like great kids, right? It's all dependent on your home environment, how you nurture your children, what morals and principles do you bring them up to be, to have. So it's definitely like a difficult, because I feel like it's case by case. But I would say that the home is the most important part for a child and for a family. That's where wealth really is. And there's a lot of verses in the Bible that talk about not worrying about tomorrow. Okay, for God feeds the birds of the air, right? And they don't worry, they don't ask God, they just know that it's going to be there, right? So like, these things just get sorted out. And there's like, I remember when I was a child, I used to catch a bus to school. I've told this story before, but I'll share it again. I used to catch a bus to school. My mum used to leave $2 for me every Thursday morning to get hot chips. $2, right? That's how much hot chips cost. So I woke up on Thursday, I took my money, I went to the bus stop. I was getting on the bus. There was a woman in front of me, and she didn't have money to get on the bus, and I had my $2 in my pocket. And I'm thinking to myself, do I give her the $2? Do I keep it for myself? I'm going to miss out on hot chips, because that's what we used to do on a Thursday afternoon. We used to go with my friends to West Point Blacktown, get gravy and hot chips, and sit down and eat. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to miss out on hot chips. Like that's just for this lady. Like, come on, she should be more organized. But my parents always brought me up to think about other people and think about them and what their needs are, right? They taught me to be empathetic towards that. So I took out my $2, I paid for the lady, and she was so grateful. She's like, thank you so much, thank you so much. I think it was like $1.80 or something. Anyway, I went to school. I was super disappointed because all my friends were going to West Point to have hot chips, and I had to go home. as I was leaving school, I went to Patrician Brothers in Blacktown. There's a little, like a ramp that leads out to the front gate. And at the end of the school day, everyone just stampedes out that gate. And in the distance, I was maybe like, say here, and the gate was like, say 40 or 50 meters, at the top. And I'm walking up to the gate, and at the end of the gate, I see this $5 note, right? And people are walking past, and I'm getting closer to the $5 note. And then I eventually get to the $5 note, and as I'm about to pick it up, someone's footsteps on it, right? And I'm like, oh, there goes my $5. But the person who stepped on it, I don't think they even realized that they stepped on the $5 note, because their foot came off, and then I picked it up straight away. And I was like, oh. And then as I was at the front gate, you're not going to believe who was walking across on the other side. It was the lady, right? And like, I remember that scenario, and I remember that like so profoundly. And I was only in I think year 7 or 8, and it's never left me, right? And it was like God was saying, like, you worry about the small things, but I've got you covered. And I promise you that this is just a small example of the blessings that I've experienced in my life. But that was the beginning. So wealth actually comes, and going back to that existential problem, because work and devoting your time to work is important, and you should be paid for that. Well, no, let me get this right. You should be doing something that you would do if you didn't get paid. But there's another part of this story, and that part is that wealth comes when you give. Wealth comes when you give. And that's the problem about people who are wealthy, is it's hard. If you know wealthy people, they are some of the most frugal meaning tight, people that you ever meet. Right? And I'm not saying that in a bad way. And I know a lot of wealthy people who are extremely giving. But sometimes the more you have, the harder it is to give. And a big part of the formula in being wealthy is actually giving. Go on a service trip. Believe me, if you have not gone on a service trip before you get married, go and do it. Okay? Forget about a girlfriend, forget about a boyfriend, go and serve. Okay? Start in your home, but then go and serve and feel the blessing that you're going to get, because you're actually the one that's going to be receiving. That I feel is the true measure of wealth. I remember this story about a monk who, when he passed away, he had his hands outside his coffin box. And everyone was like curious, why is he getting buried with his hands outside the coffin box? And then one of his like disciples was saying it was to remind people that he came into this world empty-handed, and he's going to leave empty-handed. But what remains is the people's lives that he touched. Right? So think about that. Think about it deeply. Think about how that weaves into every part of your daily life. Because it's not a concept. It's not as easy as wealth can't buy happiness. We know that. It's about how wealth can be created without material things. That's what you need to focus on. Because I see every day I come across Facebook Reels and TikTok Reels. I don't have TikTok. I just got rid of Facebook today. But there's all these, like philosophical concepts about wealth and how it can't buy happiness. And yeah, okay, we get that. But what are we doing to create wealth in another way? That's what we have to think about. All right. I think I've exhausted today's talk a little bit. If there's anyone that's got anything they want to talk about or bring to the table.
Any questions, guys? Remember, safe space.
Discussion.
We're all good?
All right.
Thank you, Mario. That was amazing. Super practical, super applicable to all our lives. Like Mario said, this is something that you guys are going to come across, and believe me, I feel like only yesterday I was still in uni studying now, all this other stuff. But it's good, guys. I mean, again, money is not bad, wealth is not bad, but like Mario's saying, like, you should be doing something that you enjoy, whether you're being paid for it or not, because that's when you actually feel like, when you really feel that fulfillment, not just seeing your bank account going up. All right. Do we have any announcements or no? All right.
Then I think we just stand up for prayer. What's food tonight? Noodles? We got noodles. What? And bubble tea come in. Wow. Very cultural. All right, let's stand up for prayer.
You are my protector from all that is evil. You hold me by the right hand. My heart with you rejoices. You are the true shepherd. You carry me on your shoulders. You take me to green pastures. Your love is overwhelming. You are always with me. You will never leave me. Your voice is within me. Do not fear, my child. You are the true shepherd. You carry me on your shoulders. You take me to green pastures. Your love is overwhelming. You elevate me in the midst of my sufferings. You strengthen my weakness. You are my true fortress. You are the true shepherd. You carry me on your shoulders. You take me to green pastures. Your love is overwhelming. You will support me in times of tribulations. Your hand guides me, doing good for me. You are the true shepherd. You carry me on your shoulders. Take me to green pastures. Your love is overwhelming. I press our good Lord, touch us in patience, mercy, compassion, love and justice, show us mercy towards sinners, repentance and life, calling us towards salvation from the promised forthcoming world. Our Lord, accept our praise of this hour and real. Use our lives and guide us according to commandments. Sanctify our souls, purify our bodies, set right our thoughts, cleanse our intentions, heal our sickness. Forgive us our sins and deliver us from every evil, grief, and distress. Surround us with your holy angels, that we may be guided and guarded them. Faith and knowledge of imperceptible and infinite glory, for you are blessed forevermore. Amen.
We thank you, our dear Heavenly Father, for bringing us all here together to listen and to engage in such a beautiful message. We ask, O Lord, that you may help in our journey and help us prioritize what is important. The world can be distracting, and its troubles and everything around us may take us away from you and take our attention away from you. But in reality, you are the source of true joy, and whether we may deceive ourselves and convince ourselves that money and wealth is what might make life easy, or it might be a temporary fix, you are the one who is a constant source of joy. We ask, O Lord, that our mindset may be set on that and fixated towards you. Support us in our daily lives, guide us, be present, do not leave us, and most importantly, Lord, forgive us for all our sins. The intercessions of Saint Mary, Saint Bishoy, and all your heavenly saints, hear us when we pray thankfully. Father.